Well, good morning and welcome to the Berks History Center's second Saturday program, virtual Zoom edition. My name is Benjamin Neely and I'm the Executive Director of the Berks History Center. And I'd like to start off by thanking Herbine & Company, Certified Public Accountants, for once again allowing us to use their Zoom webinar account to continue to hold our programs. That's very generous to them. They've always stepped up when we've had a need, and we remain very grateful to them. And I'd also like to thank all of you for joining into this free program this morning. I hope that you might consider supporting the Berks History Center by donating online. You can visit berkshistory.org and click to give. If you're not a member, information can be found also at berkshistory.org. And if you join, you begin to receive our quarterly magazine, the Historical Review of Berks County, which is a wonderful magazine, very well done with lots of interesting articles on our local history. And if you're not receiving that, I think you'd really enjoy it. Today's program is Stop It, Mr. Mayor, the shotgun resistance to the Maiden Creek Dam. And it's presented today by Brian Engelhardt, who's the author of numerous articles, and he's also trustee for the Berks History Center on our board. He also volunteers to do a lot of things, and it seems sometimes we just can't find anything that he won't say yes to. He's been a great friend to the Berks History Center and a very valued part of the team. The program today, our Q&A will be held to the end. And so on Zoom here, you can submit questions, and Brian will take a look at those at the end of the program and begin to answer those. And just some things about Zoom here, in case this is your first time with Zoom. We're all at home working off our home Wi-Fi's, and there is a chance that throughout the program that the voice might break up a little bit, and I'll be experiencing the same audio that you do. So there's very little that we can do about it. If it gets really bad, I can send a note to Brian just to let him know that he's not being heard, because the speaker is the only one who won't know that there's a problem with the audio at that moment. And we'll see if we can do anything about it, but largely we just kind of have to go with the flow on that. But hopefully we have good, clear signal today. Here at my home, I've ordered everybody to stay off the Wi-Fi until I give them the all clear sign at the end of the program. But I hope we're going to have a great show here today. And with that, I will turn the mic over to Brian Engelhardt. Thank you for doing this for us, Brian, and I'm looking forward to the show.
Thanks. And if the audio goes off, it'll be just like things at home as normal. That is, nobody will be listening to me. A number of years ago, I was researching about a baseball, the Reading Keys of 1927, who were a miserable baseball team. And I came across, in the course of going through newspapers, hot headlines that just jumped out at me. What's this all about? One of which is up in the upper left-hand corner of your screen. And what I came across was the situation where there was shotgun resistance to the Maiden Creek Dam, which was a headline to the right of your screen. The mayor during this time was William Sharman, and I put my timer on, make sure I don't run too long. There we go. And so we'll get into the program, but that's who the mayor was, and the headlines were as much a part of this as the characters, in a way. So now I'm going to disappear, and we'll just you'll just have the screen. So in the 1920s, they had trouble. They had trouble here in Pretzel City. It starts with a T and rhymes with W, which means water. Well, it doesn't rhyme. Never mind. Anyway, they had water issues. The processing works was out in Maiden Creek, the pumping station, one of the several pumping stations in the system, and it was antiquated, as the word says. That's a picture of it looking very 19th century to you, but we're in the 20th century. the dam was the Glengarry Dam, and so what the problem was, the water was schmutzy. It would get turbid. That's the scientific word for schmutzy. And during flood periods, it was hard to clean. And occasionally they had to pump raw water. Well, that's not so good. There was alerts where people had to boil water. The Commonwealth of Pennsylvania intervened. Even in 1920, they made a fuss. They said, you got to submit plans to get rid of the schmutzy water and deal with the clogged filter beds at the Maiden Creek Station. So already there had been an approval of a loan to improve the water system by the public in Reading, where they had approved several $100,000. They were going to allow their tax dollars. It was a referendum. And when you get people from Reading agreeing to spend their tax dollars, that means you really do have a problem. So, oh no, it's a chart. He's going to give us charts today. No, don't worry about that. Okay, this is the only chart. It shows you that between 1890 and 1920, the population of Reading nearly doubled. But the water system was about the same. And compliments of, thank you, George Miser, for letting me use this photo from the Passing Scene, Volume 4. It's a picture of the original water plant, or whatever you call reservoir processing system, that was constructed in 1821. The water system was created in 1819. There's a very good article in Volume 4 of the Passing Scene if you're so inclined to learn about the early years of the Reading water system. But that's what you had. It was old. Now, who are the cast of characters that are going to lead us through this drama here? We've already been introduced to Mayor William Sharman here up at the right. Mayor Sharman, he was elected in 1923. He was an attorney. He was born in Spring Township, 43 years old when he was elected. And it was the first time he'd ever run for public office. He was married and had a 8-year-old son. Originally, he wasn't an attorney. He graduated from what was it called? Kutztown State Normal School, with his degree in teaching. And he was a school teacher for a while. And then he decided, well, he wanted to make more money, I guess, or something. But he went to law school and became an attorney, Dickinson Law School. So he was, as I said, elected in 1923. Also elected in 1923 is the fellow on his left, on your left, that's Councilman Fred G. Hodges. Now, the other councilman, there was 2 Republicans, William Smith and Oscar Weatherhold. Their pictures aren't up there because they really only pop up a little bit in our story here. And E.C. Hunter, who was a Democrat. So anyway, there was a 3-2 majority on city council, the Democrats and Republicans. We'll talk. Fred Hodges was an interesting fellow. He was born in Wilmington. He was 59 when he was elected. He was a very successful businessman at the time. He self-made. He come to West Reading in 1886. He developed Fred G. Hodges Bedding Company, which was a factory down at 2nd and Chestnut Street. He owned a number of rental properties on 5th Street in Reading. I think it's the 400 block, is the Hodges Apartments. They're still called that. And he also owned the Colton Manor Hotel in Atlantic City, which was a very luxurious motel. He had a good ego. He styled himself as a businessman who would show them how to do things in the government. He said, I can give you every assurance that I'll try to get as much for the city dollar as I have from my own. Like P.T. Barnum, I think I have a good show. So anyway, he became superintendent. His position as a council, he was in charge of parks and public property, including the Bureau of Water. So As far as the project for the dam, which we'll talk about, that was his bailiwick. In the lower left-hand corner there, whoops, is the acting sheriff, John E. Esterly. The real elected sheriff was his father, John S. Esterly, but he had illness on New Year's Eve of 1926. So during the events we're going to talk about, John E. Esterly was the acting sheriff. He was 32 years old. And the guy that looks like Mr. Rogers here is Anthony O'Reilly. I just couldn't find a good picture of him. It's a crummy picture, but he was the city water engineer. Just a thing, Fred Hodges bears a resemblance, and his character reminded me of the late actor Paul Ford, a character actor who played Colonel Hall in Sergeant Bilko. Was always saying, "What's Bilko up to now?" And he also played Mayor George Shinn in The Music Man. But the resemblance and the way he conducted himself was really very reminiscent, particularly of Colonel Hall. Now, Anthony O'Reilly, the best I could do with likeness of him was he was not popular in the Maiden Creek Valley. He was very aggressive as far as the taking of the farms, and very unpopular actually in the press as well. And when he was hired, he was assistant engineer. Fred Hodges didn't like the head engineer, Emil Nubling. Nubling had been the water engineer for 29 years, 28 years and 4 months. And Hodges fired him, said, "Get out, because you're not treating me like I'm the head of things." And Nubling was a lovable fellow that wore shirt sleeves as opposed to long sleeves, and had army shoes he would wear to work. And so they created a front page headline in the Times when he was fired. So O'Reilly wasn't very well received by the two Republican members of council, who then looked and said, "Oh, he's not registered to be a water engineer." So it took 9 months. He completed training there, and finally he became the head engineer 9 months after his predecessor, the head water engineer, after Nubling was fired. So it was, that was a tough start for him. Okay, they had problems 23 and 22. They had droughts. 1924, before Emil Nubling was fired, he did a 3-volume study and program of the water extension that was needed in order to have the city move forward to comply with the requirements of comply with the requirements that the state had set forth. Mayor Sharman had given a speech outlining what was needed to be done, and said we need to enter into a program. And in December, Councilman Hodges gave a tour for the civic clubbers, a number of prominent business people in the city, as well as officials from the city and county. He took them to all the different parts of the water system at the time, and showed them the various pumping stations in City Park, as well as Maiden Creek and the like. So solutions were coming, though. Oh, a sad note in Mayor Sharman's life was his wife, Edith, who was very active in his campaign, and she came down with a cold. It turned into pneumonia, and she died within 10 days, died 10 days later. Then left the son with the mayor. But that was a very sad moment for the Sharman, and tough thing for the boy. So, undaunted, the mayor moved forward with The Monster Dam Project. Uh, on February 13th, he gave a presentation about this monster dam that's going to be coming forth. It's going to be the Lake Oneelani, which, yes, this is the Berks History Center. So Oneelani is the Indian name for little daughter, and it was given to the stream because it's a little daughter to the Schuylkill River. So there, that'll be on the quiz. All right. Anyway, tell me about this monster dam there without getting too long-winded, Brian. Uh, it's going to take 3.85 billion gallons of water. That'll be a 200-day supply. That'll outlast any drought. It'll go all the way to Virginville. Virginville, I'm telling you. The dam breast is projected to be 2,900 feet. Initially, it was going to be 21 feet high, and then in 1928, they were going to double it to 42 feet high. The spillway's 550 feet. It'll be a mile-wide reservoir, a beautiful reservoir. It'll be in 3 townships: Maiden Creek, Richmond, and Oneelani. When it will be flooding 1,080 acres of land. And those of you keeping score at home, there's 640 acres in a square mile. So that's about 3 square miles, I guess. And 2 bridges were moved because of this, covered bridge at Mosellum and a bridge in Evansville. And there is a stone bridge, which we'll talk about, that was flooded. The city engineer said it would take care of Reading's water needs for the next 50 years. How about that? And as I said, 200-day reserve with the water. And they were going to replace the sand beds, which were older technology, with mechanical filter beds so they wouldn't get gummed up as much. And it would be twice. It would be a capacity of 40 million gallons a day for processing instead of 19 million gallons, which was the current. So that's twice the processing capacity. So the Monster Dam to-do list, what you needed to do, the goal was to have it flooded in July of 1927. First, you had to get a bond issue floated. You got to get money. And then they had to get approval for it in front of the Pennsylvania Public Service Commission, June of 1926. And City Council had to approve the taking of the land for eminent domain. So the lawyers then would do their thing. And then they needed to give notice to the landowners to leave and process the eminent domain. And then a damming and a flooding, we will go. Was the time frame. Okay. First, though, to deal with was the bungalow colony. Hey, Bungalow Fred. I want you to keep that song in your head the rest of the day, okay? Anyway, it was Fred Hodges' bailiwick because it dealt with the water project to get rid of the bungalow colony. What bungalow colony are you talking about? Around the current Maiden Creek, the city owned the land, parts of it, and they lent little parcels out for $1 a year to people. Initially, it was to put tents up, and the people that had the tents said, "Oh, well, we'll put bungalows up." So they put bungalows up, and then the city said, "Well, we're going to be doing this dam. No more bungalows." They didn't give them permits the year before. They said, "You don't have permits now, get out." And so that made for hard feelings. And the group is about 70 bungalow colonists, if you will, 70 properties. They hired Wellington Bertlett, who was a very prestigious attorney. He was Tunin Janssen's lawyer, who was he was active in the news for Tunin Janssen at the time. And they appeared at city council and said, you know, can't you rethink this? And Hodges apparently had gone out there and he related to city council. He told them several months before that they had to leave. And he said, there was much unpleasantness, uh, and the men did not behave as they should have and did not treat him as a gentleman. And he said, and many of the ladies used language that was very strong. But he said they all were there and they clearly understood that they had to move when the spring came. Well, now it was spring. Well, the owner said, well, not all the owners were there. And at the meeting in city council, he said they weren't all there. And Fred Hodges takes umbrage at this. He says, this gentleman has said I lied, and I'm not going to address this matter any further. They said that people from the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania said that it's not unusual to have them allow things to be extended like this. And Hodges said, public officials will agree with anybody. And when he said this, the Times reported titters arose in the gallery. Well, the city council voted unanimously that the bungalow owners had to leave by May 1st, and they did. And that's the rear guard Maiden Creek. That was the last bungalow that was being dissembled there. So there was the bungalow colony. Getting money. First, they had to float some bonds, which ultimately they did. That's really dull, so I'm not going to talk more about that. And then they didn't get all the bonds floated, but they got enough to get started. Then the next thing is you got to pay for the dam. They had to raise water rates. So Fred Hodges he anticipated not everybody on council was going to be happy with hearing about raising water rates. His quote was, I have my guns loaded to the muzzle with ammunition. Anyway, he must have had enough ammunition because the council unanimously adopted the new water rates. Actually, one other thing, he went and effectively, by the end of the year, he had managed to get 28,500 properties hooked up to water meters. And they did that remarkably quickly. And still only 300 remain, but that was a lot of water meters in a relatively short period of time. So, what we have next. The public service hearing, was in June. About 100 of the landowners out in Maiden Creek didn't want the land flooded that had been farmed by their families for more than 100 years. The nerve of those people. I'm being facetious. And there was farms that went back to the early 18th century that were going to be flooded, were many of the properties. So they appeared at a hearing on the 23rd of June up in Harrisburg. They put in evidence that the project was too expensive, that they didn't really need a dam for the city of Reading. And as I said, a bit of history was standing in the way that it would cover any number of historical properties that had been settled since the early 18th century. Just in that spirit, the proposed flooding of the Maiden Creek you see on the right is that was the title of an article that appeared in the Times. Robert Baker Bamford would write a weekly article about county history. And one week around this time, he chose to focus on the historical depredation of what the flooding of this area would create. There were a number of other articles in the in the Eagle and the Times that would highlight various historical properties that were going to be inundated. So that part of things went hard. However, the testimony at the hearing by the state engineer was that if Reading didn't have this flooded, they would have a severe water shortage, and they needed to have it. So, among the properties that were subject of being flooded, there was a Friends Meeting House that fortunately was preserved. It was moved, and now it can be found at 27 West Shore Road in Leesport. That's a picture of the Friends Meeting House down in the lower left here, as it was, and this is the doorway with the notice of condemnation on it at the time. There was also a cemetery with it, and the agreement was the city would relocate the graves. The one thing that turned out to be a problem, and George Miser I spoke to about this, because there was a bit written about this in the passing scene as well. They didn't have markers on Fred cemeteries for the Friends Society don't have markers on the graves, so they kept finding more bodies. The city paid to have another graveyard, and so they relocated. But he quoted Darlington Hoop Sr., who was an attorney that was involved in the proceedings for that time, who said, "We did the best we could. They took limited amounts of, like a cubic foot of soil counted, a cubic foot of dirt in the graveyard counted as what they couldn't, that counted for a person, but they kept finding more and more remains. So that's pretty grisly. But that's what happened with that graveyard. But the Friends Meeting House lives on. Another cemetery was the Jacob Forney family, say that several times, Forney family cemetery. And they were the Forney family built their barn in 1780. Their house was built in 1800. It was Forney's great-great-grandfather. And the first in the family cemetery was 1820. It's great-great-grandmother. They relocated this to the Laureldale Cemetery. Unfortunately, the Forney land was flooded. Several other farms of note, which were totally or at least partially immersed, were the Rothenberger, Kemmerer, Kint, and Phillips farms. And there was a stone bridge that was inundated. About 10 years ago, there was an article in the Reading Eagle evoking memories of this inundated stone bridge, 4 arches. It was about 300 feet long, and George Miser was quoted in the article as saying it's a magnificent bridge. And apparently it's about you can see a half mile from the parking area off of Route 73 at Lake Lonawani. And in periods where we had dry spells, the stone bridge, you can see parts of it comes up above. So there, you can catch a glimpse of the stone bridge if we have a drought. So they're moving along. After the testimony was given on the 23rd, the Public Service Commission took 5 minutes and said, yep, we're going to allow this dam. So they allowed the dam. July 7th, after bids were submitted, the contract was awarded to build the dam at the cost of about $400,000. So moving right along. So we get to the day, the groundbreaking day, August 4th, 1926, 2 days before my father, Theodore Englehart, was born. and he, but anyway, so he missed this. After City Council broke that day, it was a big deal. 11 a.m., 25 automobiles travel out from the city of Reading out to Maiden Creek. And 100 dignitaries were there, officials from City Hall, officials from the various townships that were near Onalawney and Maiden Creek and Richmond, Berks County commissioners, people from the various civic groups, the Rotary, the Kiwanis and the Lions Club. And it was a very hot day, which I think was probably good. So that meant it was much quicker speeches. But what Mayor Sharman did say was, "This is the time to build for a big future of Reading. The time has come when all talk and quibbling must cease and work must be done. These improvements to the water system are going to mean a wonderful thing for the future of Reading." Okay, I'm letting you all have your goosebumps on that. All right. And then after that, Councilman Hodges, according to the Times and the Eagle, said, Councilman Hodges read some statistics. Okay. Now I said it was hot. That's why the reporters probably didn't really listen that much to that part. And also there was a chicken dinner, winter chicken dinner waiting for everybody. The McLean Construction Company, who was the builder that had been awarded the job, sponsored this chicken dinner in one of the farmhouses nearby. And so everybody went out there. So now, Councilman Hodges, because he was in charge of this project and had done the planning and the like, it was the largest public works project in the history of Reading. So he had the real fun. And at 2:45 p.m. that afternoon, kaboom, down it went the plunger. This is a bit of a note here. It was symbolic. The paper said, a sharp little explosion and a small rain of dirt happened, and it was greeted by polite applause from the crowd. And it was probably the happiest moment that Hodges would have during the 4 years that he would serve on city council. You got to believe that. From this point on, him and O'Reilly, Anthony O'Reilly, the engineer, had different roles in the project. Up to now, they were working with council and they were doing all planning. Now they had to get the thing built. And that was going to be a tougher road. Both of them had they were kind of skittish people. In 1925, Hodges resigned on the 30th of June in the morning, and then he unresigned by the afternoon. But he was upset that nobody was listening to him. And then O'Reilly had a nervous breakdown in January of 1927 already about this project. So both of them were fairly high strung. So what happened next? Reminding everybody of why it would be good to have a dam. In August of 1926, there was a water crisis. And it wasn't caused by droughts. It was caused by too much rain. They had a record rainfall that month, and it flooded the filter beds. And so they got all gummed up. The pumping station had to be shut down a couple times for cleaning. The water supply dropped to 12 million gallons. Both newspapers carried requests from Anthony O'Reilly for the ladies of the town to move wash day from Monday to some other day of the week. Okay. They shut down swimming pools. The Reading Company was asked to water its engines not at the yards in Reading, but to do it outside of town because they didn't have the water there. And in downtown buildings that were higher than 4 stories, any story, there was no water pressure. So I guess you had to go downstairs if you wanted to do something involving flushing. So that was a tough period of time. It took 2 weeks before they were able to address that or get it all straightened out. But it reminded everybody of why you needed this dam project. Okay, so we move through. It's spring of 1927. Uh, but what's happened now is they filed the papers with the court for eminent domain taking. The city council had taken the necessary steps. Landowners have been served, and their time to leave expired at the beginning of April. But they're uh, doing work out there on areas that were owned by the city of Reading without going on other people's land. And Mayor Sharman, I think, takes essentially a victory lap. Earlier in the week, he had said, we're going to have a new bungalow colony, I think, around this new lake, where she'll be like a Gold Coast. There'll be really nice places where rich people will invest in beautiful places around what this nice lake will be. And he was talking about there'll be $300,000 more of revenue from the water rates and the like. So he's feeling pretty good about it. Anyway, what was anticipated, and after the farmers were served, the landowners were served, they had 60 days to get off the land. They also had procedures that they should have followed to go through and get funds through proceedings where what would be called a viewer would be appointed if they couldn't reach an agreement with the city about what the city would pay for their land. And if they didn't get off, the city had the right then to go to court and get what was called an ejectment writ, while even while the proceedings were going on for the land the evaluation. And they were supposed to get off by the end of April. Is what they in February they had been served, and end of April was the deadline. So by early April, 40 properties had been purchased outright. People had settled, but there was still 120 properties that were involved with this project that were not that weren't moving forward, and they were going to be the subject of ejectments. So the mayor goes out to have his victory lap, and that was going back here. That's him out there at Ottolani. It says logging resumed in Berks. He was like, oh, look at this, you're logging again, and he was walking about. He was a outdoorsman, and so he was enjoying himself that day until headline in the Reading Times of April 7th: farmers take shotgun resistance to Maiden Creek Dam. Sorry about the shot being partially covered there. And he discovers what was termed a growing crisis. Okay. So, okay. Wednesday, the Times article underneath this headline was resentment is seething and trouble is brewing from one end to the other of the lush valley of the Maiden Creek, while erstwhile peaceful farmers talk of shotgun resistance to the invading army of Water Bureau engineers. To the right there is Assistant City Solicitor John Rothamo. He was relatively young. He comes before council that day and says, he said, how's it going there, John? And he says, well, I'm in a tough position. I'm between the engineers and the farmers. And the engineers, he says, they're intent on their job, and they see it as wanting to shove these farmers from the land that they and their forefathers have held for generations, as though they were so many hills in the way of the dam. Uh, Pretty flowery there. John Rothmel went to Princeton, so learned how to be eloquent. Uh, anyway, the farmers had crops in the ground that would be lost if they vacated in accordance with the 60-day notice. And he pointed out the cities in the position to throw them off their land before they even have a chance to buy more land and before they get down money for the purchase of a new farm. And he said the engineers are creating a dangerous feeling in the valley. He says there's talk of shotgun methods, and the landowners are muttering of trouble to come if they're made to leave at once. And at this point, Hodges says, "Yes, I heard talk of shotguns when I walked around the valley." And Sharman then confirmed that when he was walking around, he had heard the same kind of talk. Uh, so Rothmel says, well, maybe we can work something out that we can lease the farms to them for $1 until we really need their land when it's going to be flooded, and give them a little extra time until we need the land. And Sharman says, yeah, that's the only thing you can do. You can't blame the farmers. 60 days really isn't a lot of time. Now, Councilman Hodges said, now these people have known this was going to happen for years. But he said, I don't want to take advantage of them. I don't oppose allowing them to stay as long as we don't need the land. But then he said, if the city didn't ask the farmers to vacate until Christmas, they still would put up just as much of a fuss about leaving. Christmas, I say. Anyway, and Engineer O'Reilly, who was there, said, well, we got to begin the flooding in July, okay? That's when the project needs to go forward. So the dollar lease thing did work out so well. But as I said, the account in the Times termed this to be a growing crisis. So that's April 7th. So what's next? What's next was opening day for the Reading Keys. Okay. All right. Right there. Okay. Here we are with my Reading Keys hat on. Mayor Sharman should have been opening up the season, the home season, with throwing out the first ball. But what happens? He didn't show up. He said he had a cold. On the front page of the paper, there was a little article, a regular column written by Abe Hurwitz, the managing editor at the time, called Ask Elmer. And the headline, ball game breaks record, no errors except Mayor Sharman's. So either 4,000 or 3,000 people showed up, depending whether you read the Eagle or the Times. They lost the game, but Fred Merkel, the manager, hit a home run. That's Fred down at the bottom of the screen, crossing home plate. That's Mayor Sharman the year before at the 26th home opener. The Keys were a terrible team in 1926 and 1927. They were also a terrible team, but this is really 1920s lingo from the Ask Elmer column. Elmer was a dim-witted reporter, a fictional dim-witted reporter who said he was the sharpest reporter of any morning paper in Reading, PA. And the mayor was absent as kicked from near beer, as absent as white collars in a fascist parade, chicken in a chicken salad, or lonely hearts when you're drawing for a flush. How about that? That's 1920s lingo. Anyway, Mayor Sharman missed the game. let everybody down. Uh, so, but now back the question: to evict or not to evict? Um, the council is concerned about what they're going to do to the farmers. They're talking, their legal rights were that they can kick them off. But as a matter of conscience, Sharman's troubled. O'Reilly addressed the council on May 20th and said the valley needs to be flooded by July. And unless that was vacated, and when they mean vacated, they got to take the stumps out of the ground. They got to take the buildings, all the wood has to be removed because they don't want to have the wood under water. It would rot things. It would rot and pollute the water. Also, the wood would float to the dam breast. So we got to dam this valley by this summer or we'll face a water shortage. And he was pushing Rothamel to get the farmers off the land. This is Rothamel's Princeton yearbook picture because he's getting increasingly idealistic. Hodges again says, well, you know, whatever time we give them, we could give them till Christmas and they'll still complain. He made that Christmas thing again. Rothamel said he doubted the contractor would object to postponement of the work at this time to let them get their crops out of the ground. Said they have plenty of other things to do. And he said the farmers would suffer if the flooding occurred in the ground much more than the city would suffer. The farmers' loss will be greater than any that the city will have. Sharman said, look, the water department's complied with the letter of the law. I'm not disagreeing with that. But my sympathy is with these farmers. In spite of the fact we must take their land, maybe we can hold off ejecting them until they get their crops out. So there was a debate there. And in the meanwhile, ejectment writs were issued for 4 properties. The sheriff had them delivered, that they were delivered to the sheriff, and now the sheriff has 4 of these landowners. It's going to have the obligation to throw them off the land. So acting Sheriff Esterly says to council, well, I was out this past weekend to talk to the people subject to the ejectment writs. And I listened to what they had to say, but I'm not doing anything until I talk to my lawyer, Ira Cutts, who is the solicitor. That's him on the right there. Ira Cutts was a former district attorney. He's very thoroughly familiar with county government and the ins and outs of politics and the like. So the young Esterly wants to talk to his mouthpiece before he has to address both these 4 writs, as well as they have 50 other writs that are on their way to being processed to throw people off the land. But he did make the statement that the law is the law and no one gets special consideration. At this point, Sharman said, we need to deal with these people individually. So what happens? The Reading Times has a dramatic editorial on the front page Tuesday morning, April 26th. Pay these farmers now. It says for the city of Reading to seize the sheriff's writ from the farmers for their fertile lands without offering to pay a cent is within the law, but it's cruel, barbarous, and unjust. Only warped intelligence, content with the meager solace of being legally right, can justify this. And then it goes on and on and on to that spirit. And it ends, gentlemen of city council, call back the sheriff. Take these writs from his hands. Tell him Reading City wants the farmer's land, not the farmer's lifeblood. So Walter, city engineer O'Reilly says, we got to get rid of these farmers. We got to get the land because we need to flood it, or else we're going to have a water shortage. And then he refused any further interview with the newspapers. Other councilmen told O'Reilly he was wrong, and they disagreed with him. Hodges was incensed, and Sharman basically said, we need to consider perhaps moving on this differently. I'm loath to take over and step over somebody, but we'll consider this, and I will talk to the managers of the project. So what happened? Yay! If you're the Reading Times. And the mayor steps up and stops the evictions. Yeah, the dramatic, you can see the public sentiment cartoon was on the front page of the Times. And that says Maiden Creek farmers there. And public sentiment has rescued them from going over. Now, Sharman basically said, we'll negotiate with the farmers, and he's told Rothamel and the city department, the legal department, to negotiate on individually. And so kind of an odd juxtaposition was a separate article where Hodges explained what the Water Bureau's stance was. So you have the mayor doing one thing, the Water Bureau opposing it, but the Water Bureau lost because council voted in favor of moving forward with negotiating and holding off any further evictions. Hodges' position wasn't any different than what it had been up to that point. These people knew what was going on. They really should have moved forward. They should have gotten lawyers. They should have been ready to be moving off their land. Well, they weren't, and now they're going to move forward a little slower. Now, stop it, Mr. Mayor was the next day, even after the Sharman said, no, we're not going to, we're going to move forward. We're not going to throw people off the land. Stop it, Mr. Mayor referred to the 4 writs that they had already and been issued. Turns out that the writs were to owners of land which were used for bungalows, not the colony, but they were resort, more like summer places. And they just didn't, they were not crucial farm properties, but they said the paper's position was just withdraw these writs, and the spirit of things will be served better. So the next, on Friday's council meeting, Sharman said, yeah, we're going to withdraw the writs. And there was some sharp, a sharp exchange. First off, about 15 landowners showed up. They said, we're ready to talk to you. We're ready to talk to you. And one of them was Jacob Forney. And he said when the water people were out, they didn't want to talk to him about buying the land. Nobody wanted to talk voluntarily. And he said the notice paper that the guy tried to hand him accidentally fell and got stepped on by a cow. So Hodges denied that he wanted to throw people off land or serve any ejectment papers. And then he said, I want to say that this has been a reflection on my honesty, integrity, and ability. Mr. Mayor, if you attended to your own department as I have to mine, you would have had more time to devote to others. He said, Mr. Mayor, this has been a lot of politics by you, and you're playing it for your own comeback. Sharman happened to be running for re-election that year. Sharman says, if you had not spent so much time with your Atlantic City hotel, some of these things would not have happened. And Hodges, using a rich phrase from the era, said, piffle. I have been right on this job all the time. I've not been in Atlantic City since January, and some people have been trying to drive me out of office that I was elected to, and I am going to stay. And Sharman says, if you want to have a row, let's go outside. And Hodges says, no, let's do it right here. So they're going to go to Fisk City and council. And fortunately, cooler heads prevailed. That is, other councilmen holding them back, I guess. And now Hodges, remember, is like 64, and Mayor Sharman is 20 years younger. So the smart money's probably on Mayor Sharman. Anyway, they intervened. They said, calm down. Everybody calms down. They calmed down. And they said, Fred Hodges, you don't get excited about just things you've been reading in the paper, and you were doing what you thought was the right thing. So anyway, that was the row, and Fisk City was not entered. Okay, peace was restored on Monday, May 2nd. Sharman, just like, Gorbachev and Reagan did a walk in the woods, they went on a drive to Maiden Creek Township along with Councilman McConnell and Engineer O'Reilly, and they made nice. And Sharman said, let's try to put this behind us and move forward towards getting this job done. And besides that, who wants to have animosity when Straw Hat Day is coming up? Saturday, May 7th, 1927 was Straw Hat Day. Mayor Sharman had passed a proclamation. You can't read it, but I'll read it to you. That it proclaimed that May 7th was officially Straw Hat Day, and the official straw hat stores were going to participate in a thing on Saturday at George Field. Reading High School was going to be playing Easton High School in baseball. And at that time, a plane would fly over before the game and drop little parachutes. And each parachute would have a ticket. And the ticket would have the name of one of the straw hat stores. And if you got that ticket, you could go and get a free straw hat at that store. Plus the 100 tickets or 100 parachutes were going to have tickets to the Lowe's Colonial Theater on Penn Street. And so all that comes to mind with me, I thought also was thinking of Les Messman on WKRP with the turkey drop. But anyway, but that was the Straw Hat Day. So everybody was buddies at that point. Just a side note here. This is the Reading Times. This is the Reading Eagle. This is the coverage of the Times during these 3 critical days in April when this crisis occurred. Lots of headlines up top. This is the only thing that was written about it in the Eagle, in the middle of the front page. That's Tuesday. With the benefit of highly sophisticated technology, I highlighted Wednesday, the big headline, once again, cartoon there, dramatic, and little things schmooped in the bottom of the front page on the Eagle. It was on the front page. It was down the bottom there. Uh, and finally, the Stop It Mr. Mayor Day. Once again, headlines up here about Maiden Creek, and it's a much less profiled article. And I must say, I could not find any mention of the word shotgun in the Eagle coverage of the whole the fair. Oh, incidentally, at the end of May, the Reading Keys 31 game losing streak ended when Fred Merkel hit a single in the bottom of the 11th. 2,000 fans flood on the field, carry Merkel to the clubhouse, and the Keys were now 4-41. So there was some history going on there as well. Now, so the mayor undertakes the negotiations through the city office, and nobody gets kicked off land. Everybody eventually negotiates matters. But Monty Hall was not the reincarnation by Bill Sharman, did not get reincarnated into Monty Hall. Basically, the city ended up paying almost four times the amount of for the land that they had budgeted. So instead of paying, they ended up paying a little more than $1 million for the land, and they had originally budgeted 25, about a quarter of that. The dam also ended up costing not $400,000, but $500,000. William Sharman was not known as Horse Trading Bill. So he went way over budget there. And the consequence of this was in the 1927 elections, he's voted out. Henry Stump was elected, and George Snyder and Jim Maurer were all from the Socialist Party, and so suddenly there was a socialist majority in city council, so Mayor Sharman's reign was coming to an end. That's Henry Stump. Excellent article online about Henry Stump on the website of the Johnson Library section of the historical or the History Center website. You'll note that Mayor Sharman got only he didn't win a precinct in the city. This one he wins by 2 votes. Eventually votes came in. He didn't win even that precinct. He got schmeiced pretty bad. He even got beaten by the Republican that he had beaten the election before. Mayor Stump, incidentally, would serve 3 times as mayor. He never succeeded himself, but he would 3 times as mayor. So the new dam gets built. It doesn't get raised. It doesn't get flooded until more than a year later. The dam isn't raised, isn't made 41 feet, 42 feet. Whoops. Yeah, I'm a little over now. 42 feet until about 1936. In 1936, they complete that part of the construction. But there was dedication in August of 29. They got it at least functioning, and it was servicing the needs of the city much better. That's O'Reilly and Rothamel in the picture shaking hands. Mayor Stump is involved as well. A new cast of characters, but the 2 professionals were no longer at loggerheads. Postscript, it's a beautiful dam now. There's been repairs over the years. It's almost 100 years since the project started. That's a picture I took. Isn't it nice? I want to hear oohs and ahs out there. And occasionally there's issues that pop up in the lake but they're unexplained. Postscripts of the characters, both Esterlys, John Esterly, that's the fellow that was elected sheriff. That's his son that was acting sheriff. John was pretty sick. He dies in 1929. His son lives he was a very respected citizen in Mount Penn. He didn't run for re-election or election as sheriff, but he was a very prominent civic-minded citizen. Anthony O'Reilly served the city until 1950 and died at age 68 in 1965. John Rothamel had a long and prestigious legal career. He died at age 92 in 1988. So Fred Hodges didn't end up as well. The stock market crash was tough. He ended up in receivership. He lost all of his real estate investments. He lost the betting business. He lost the hotel. And ultimately, as I said, he went into receivership, which was a form of bankruptcy. He died in 1950 at the age of 85. Bill Sharman, that's a picture after he lost the election that the paper ran. He returns to law practice. He never runs again for public office. Same was true with Sharman. And the quote here was, "I lost my scalp at the polls, so I went out and got me some pelts." He was a hunter, so he took a day off and went out to Spring Township and got him some raccoons. Died at age 76 in 1957. So that's it. Some other material on this is, as I recommended on the website, is an article about Mayor Henry Stump. There's other articles I've written for the Historical Review involving a lot of these characters. One's the biography of William Sharman. Deal of the Century is about the construction of Buttonwood Street Bridge and the role of the city and county officials in that. Battle of Line Box Hill was, there was a movement to move the courthouse to West Reading, and the city and county officials were involved there. That was all during the 20s as well. And coming soon to a Historical Review near you would be an article about the political machinations with the museum. The Museum in a Swamp, the politics and controversy of determining the location of the Reading Public Museum. Also, the Passing Scene has an article on the Reading Water Company and system. So that is the proverbial it. And now I will say, does anybody have any questions? And I will also say, Ben, now what?
Hey, great job, Brian. There is a question in the Q&A box. I can just read it to you here.
Oh, okay.
It comes here. Do you see a parallel between the public good versus individual rights aspect relating to the dam with today's controversy over the wearing of masks?
Let me say this. Well, I'll tell you what. I don't. There's some discomfort in wearing a mask, but that's not like getting your land flooded. That's a lot more final. The one thing that would be, I would say, criticism of the farmers, if you'll note that 40 landowners went ahead and worked within the system, and they weren't in the crisis mode. They 100 people, they had the opportunity to get the money, and they had the opportunity to get their damages and to be out of there, or at least well along in the process. But they did pretty good by sticking. They ended up cumulatively getting 4 times the amount that they were really originally bargained for. So sometimes striking a hard bargain is not a bad thing. as far as the mask versus, they are parallel, but I see the mask as something that it's a bit of an inconvenience. It ain't like losing your farm. So there. I guess all the other questions are why did you go on so long? Anyway, anything else?
We do have another question here. You mentioned Fred Merkle playing for the Reading Keys. Is that the same Fred Merkle who played Major League Baseball and is infamous for costing the New York Giants the pennant in the early 1900s?
Yes, that would be him. That is Fred Bonehead Merkle. And actually, he was fired twice as manager of the Reading Keys. I didn't plug another article I wrote about Fred Merkle. You have to be quite a manager to be fired twice. There's an article about the 1927 Reading Keys and their 31 game losing streak. That's also in the Historical Review. That was written in 2006. That was the first thing I wrote for the Historic Review. And indeed, Fred got fired first during the losing streak. They brought him back, and then the Chicago bought the team in the middle of the season. So they not only had four managers and two different owners that season. It's a good article, and I do make a presentation on that too. Long answer to your short question.
We have another question just came in. Any idea on how long it took to flood the new dam?
I think it was about a year. A year later is when finally the lands were negotiated and whatever, and the crops were out. So the flooding took place near the end of 1928. I don't know how long it took for the water to come up. That's like science. And what was remarkable to me is that the thing that was going to be 1928 was when they were going to make the dam for. Hell, it almost took 10 years to finally achieve that. So a little slower than they hoped.
Well, that is the last question we have. Oh, wait a minute. Just one more came in here. Let's check that out. Okay. Do you show individual properties involved? I was curious about my grandfather's property.
That's me grimacing. Which one? The Rothenberger, the Kint, or the? I'll go back. If this doesn't make anybody get car sick. Here we go.
The property owner's name was Walter Dietrich.
Oh, I'm sorry. No, if it's not one of these properties that's listed here, I didn't. I tried to focus to the degree that would be appropriate on that aspect of things, but this was as much about the political aspects of the process as it was more about the political aspects of the process than the land itself. But of course, the land needed to be addressed because it was of significant value. Also, there's a place called Calcium. There was a little town called Calcium that I learned about from George Miser that is inundated, but that was Calcium is no more.
Okay, well, the Q&A box is clear at the moment.
I've got to thank everybody for listening to me, talking about this. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your indulgence and I hope you had extra caffeine in your coffee for any different parts of this that might have gone a little slowly. But it was an interesting story to me that unfolded and shows that, frankly, it's 100 years ago all this stuff was going on. But much like it was a good question about the paralleling of the common good versus individual rights or if perceived liberty, uh, people haven't changed so much at all, and politics is still nasty, and that's what makes it fun and interesting to write about.
Well, thank you very much, Ryan, for being willing to take this leap into the virtual world with us. We sure do appreciate it. And appreciate all you who tuned in today, and hope that you enjoy the rest of your weekend here. But this will bring us to the end of the Berks History Center's second Saturday broadcast day. Take care, all.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.